Today we're traveling back in time, deep in the heart of the Mojave Desert, in a place called No Man's Land, where they prepared for war. On December 7th, 1941, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, a naval base stationed in Hawaii. This cast the United States into World War II against Japan and Germany. The desert training centers were created 5 months later in order to prepare our troops to go to war with Germany in North Africa. Hello. Today we're at the Iron Mountain Desert Training Center on the southern side of the fenced-in area. There were a total of 13 division camps within the large World War II era Desert Training Center, which was established across the Mojave and Sonoran deserts in California and Arizona. These camps, along with numerous support facilities and airfields, were created to train American soldiers for desert warfare in North Africa. The first thing we want to find is the relief map. At Camp Iron Mountain, it will be enclosed in a fenced area to protect it. Each one of these camps had this relief map, and although Camp Young was the headquarters, the training facilities would all meet to plan their mock battles, their attacks, their defenses, all the things that they wanted to do to train their troops to prepare for war. Along the way, we're going to see a lot of roads, a lot of sidewalks, a lot of gardens that have all been formed by these rocks, these rows of rocks that define the sidewalks, roads, and gardens. Check this out. Okay, we've made it to the relief map. I hope you can see it through the chain link fence. Now, you see these posts out there. Those posts actually had signs that would give the name of each one of the areas or each one of the camps. There was a platform or stand that they would stand on that would elevate them so they could look over the entire relief map, and they had different people out there moving things around so they could plan their battles. I will take the drone up so you can see the relief map from up above. That way you can get a better understanding of how it was made. Now keep in mind there's been erosion over these last several decades. Here is some of the cable that was left behind, some relics. And there's a lot of this stuff here. As you can see, a lot of it. Out that direction is the
Catholic chapel, which we'll visit. But let's go see what we can find. As we head down, we're going to go over to see if we can locate the Protestant chapel first, and then we'll move our way over to the Catholic chapel. And hopefully along the way between those, because this place is a pretty big place, not as big as I thought initially, considering there were hundreds of thousands of soldiers here. And quite frankly, they might not have fenced the entire region in. Now, I know closer to the mountains, there is they would play their war games, and we may go up that way and see what we can see. I see mountains in the distance, and I'm not sure what that's about, but it could be significant for this, as well as out there is where they practice digging their foxholes. So, as one soldier said, I must have dug thousands of foxholes. So, yeah.
Here's a drone view of the relief map.
So here's a relic. There's an old ration can right there. You'll see these scattered throughout. And we have this walkway here that is kind of headed in the direction we're going to find the Protestant chapel. It's on one side, the Catholic chapel for some reason is on the other side, so we'll get one and then go pick up the other. And somewhere in between we're going to eat lunch. As we head our way to the chapel, you can see rock sidewalks everywhere where these tents were, leading to each tent site, walkways between the tents. The water has eroded some of the roads, but you can see them clearly. This was obviously a very concentrated area of soldiers. This has rock paths everywhere. I'm still looking for insignias, and I know there's some out here that have survived, and hopefully I can find them. But how cool is that? Look at these guys. They made a, a roundabout. Yeah, that's cool. We've got some wire over here. Walking down the main part of the road. I'd imagine that many people, they're going to have quite a few mess tents and kitchens around to eat from. But you can see some of these walkways go quite a ways. There's a lot to explore out here. Let's go get back on the main road, headed out. You can see some relics here. Looks like it could have been isolator or something else that's kind of has a metal bar through it and rubbery on the outside. And there, right in front of us down the main road on the right side, is the Protestant chapel. You can see this is another highly concentrated area with all the rock formations that were made, rock sidewalks, and this is one of the main roads that we're on. We've been walking on this main road figuring that, I figured if we take the main road, it's probably going to lead us at least close to the chapel, and I suspect that's the same thing that's going to happen when we go to the other side to find the Catholic chapel. Why they're divided, I don't know, in such a large expanse, or even how they divided the troops. But you can see sidewalks. And we're still on the road. Once we get to the chapel, we'll probably eat lunch, explore some of this, and then head back the other side of camp. I'd like to find some of the insignias of these troops. Someone has placed a log here to help with the erosion. And we are approaching the chapel. Walking on the sidewalks here. You can see, we'll take the sidewalk that they took. Look at this. This is cool, all this work. Can you imagine doing all this work out in the desert heat and the cold of the winter? Because it gets cold out here. This is a great place to train for North Africa. All right. These got white granite, which leads to the Protestant chapel here. How cool is that? You can see by looking at it that there was obviously pictures or plaques in those areas where there is concrete squares. Possibly there was an altar for taking communion or for the chaplain to preach. All right, let's go take a closer look. Now, taking a closer look at this chapel, there we see these concrete squares in here, which obviously had some sort of plaques, which are now gone. This rock in the center, and I noticed that they used a lot of white quartz here. All this is made of granite, but look at that white quartz rock there. That's really cool. I've checked, and there is no insignias. Chances are good. It's a concrete. It's a concrete foundation and walkway up here, but no one dared write their name in it, probably because being soldiers, they weren't going to get away with that. This is the back, and this round area here was probably where they had a tank for baptisms. That's the only reason I can think they would have that round area here. I'll take you up into it in just a second. This is what it looks like on the inside. Not sure why that rock is sitting in the middle. You can see, looks like there was rock there, or wood there. Or maybe it was just dark rock. Someone's left some tithing. It's been a while since tithing has taken place here, I imagine. And this is what it looks like on the inside. Now, those are the sidewalks around there you can see out there. Now imagine bleachers, wooden bleachers and dirt and blankets sitting out here and on Sunday morning and maybe Wednesday afternoon for Bible studies and the soldiers' time off, and sitting out there listening to the Word of God. know, sometimes peanut butter and jelly is good, especially out here. That little bit of sugar and sweetness, the peanut butter, sometimes it's really good to have. Thank you. Oh, I grabbed Cohen's Gatorade. I'm sure he's looking for it. Thanks, Cohen. Now, I had mentioned this quote by General George Patton before, and he had said, "We cannot train soldiers to fight in the deserts of North Africa by training them in the swamps of Georgia." Matter of fact, let me read this. So I got this quote. "We cannot train troops to fight in the deserts of North Africa in the swamps of Georgia." Quote, General George S. Patton. Now, Patton, who was familiar with the Mojave Desert, knew this place well. And his logic was right on, because at that time, the U.S. was neutral. Even though Nazi Germany was using this new war technique called Blitzkrieg, where they were bringing in armored tanks quickly, flying in the air and attacking so quickly that it was almost impossible for their enemies to mount a defense. General George Patton knew what he was up against with Rommel, who was a brilliant commander in his own right and had superior firepower with his tanks. So he came out to this place in the spring of 1942, which is already several years into the war that was created by Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party. But the U.S. was remaining neutral, figuring they didn't have anything to gain or get anything to lose. That was up until December 7th, 1940, when Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. The United States declared war on Japan, and Germany in turn a few days later declared war on the United States. They felt that North Africa was the best place for them to launch a counterattack and to try and drive back Nazi Germany. Rommel was there, who was a brilliant commander. And his tanks, well, his tanks had superior firepower to ours, but ours was very maneuverable, and that was our strength. So Patton decided to take and use this camp plus 11 others. I think it's 11 or 12, not counting Palin Pass. If you put Palin Pass in there, which was the big battlefield, to train troops. 1 million troops would be trained here in the next 2 years. Can you imagine if you were a soldier and you were told, hey, after boot camp, you're going to go to California to your training center. Now, can you imagine if you're a 17, 18-year-old, 19-year-old who's going to go into boot camp, and then at boot camp, when they've completed that, are told, hey, you're going to go to California for your training. I mean, you could imagine they're thinking, oh my gosh, we're going to have endless beaches, the Pacific Ocean, palm trees, and girls in bathing suits. Yeah. And then they arrived here, and it is said their heads just dropped and they were extremely depressed. Is this California? Well, in fact, California has a lot of desert. We have a lot of coastline, but we have a lot of desert, and this is a perfect place for them to train. Because what Patton was doing was trying to save their lives by training them in an environment that was very similar, if not exact, to what they were going to be fighting in. And I believe he did that. He succeeded in that. On top of that, I think when you look at this environment that we're in right now, you're going to find that the desert out here gets hot. I mean, it gets hot just like in North Africa. And in the winter time, it gets very, very, very cold. Now, right now, we're at the end of February, beginning of March. So we're here at about the time that the first troops arrived. They arrived in March of 1942. And that is like 80 years, almost a little over 80 years ago that this place took place. But there was 1 million soldiers in all these camps who were trained to go fight World War II. A time when that was different than our time, events being different, but a time that is not so long ago. Not so far removed from us that we cannot relate. A lot of the freedoms that we have are because these young men and young women, and I say young women because these facilities were so large, they had multiple mess tents, they had multiple hospitals, and there were people who actually died in training out here. But Patton's position was, look, we are going to lose a few men to dehydration, to sunstroke, and to natural accidents. But if we don't train out here like North Africa, like it is in North Africa, we're going to lose hundreds of thousands. And it turns out he was right. Now, as I said, this is the Protestant chapel. And it was made of stone and concrete, a lot of white quartz. And I don't know how they divided up the camp, but I know that the Catholic chapel is way on the other side, which we will go to as well. But this camp goes beyond, way beyond what you can see. Off in the distance over there is the California Aqueduct Pumping House. And I told you earlier that these sites were chosen because they were near the newly formed aqueduct and he could get water out of here. Now they had amphitheaters here, they had entertainment, people would come out, the celebrities like they do in the USO. But for the most part, it was training, building these rock walkways, and resting when they could take their leisure. One person said, I have arrived in no man's land. And in fact, this place has that name still to this day as no man's land. There's not much out here. It's pretty remote, actually. Even the road over there, which is Highway 62, I'm not sure if you can see the vehicles passing down there. There's a couple semis driving, actually 3 of them. That is one of the least traveled roads in the state. As a matter of fact, that section of the road, which is also called Rice Road, wasn't paved until the 70s. That tells you how remote it was. There are train tracks over there, trains, and that's where these young men would get off of these trains and come here. I mean, I can imagine the huge disappointment when they got here. But this mountain over here is Iron Mountain, and this is the Iron Mountain Desert Training Center. And there's so much here, it's just mind-boggling. At first, it's not as big as I thought it was going to be, but it still is big. I mean, I still can't see the perimeter, the fence that's over there yet, where I can't see it. I can see the fence behind me, it's way up there, and the fence down there is way down there, and my truck is way over there, about at least a mile away. And we're going to walk several miles to get over, or at least 2 miles, if not more, to get over to the other chapel. The Iron Mountain Desert Training Center. That's pretty cool.
On my way crossing back over towards the Catholic chapel, I came across this large, what was at one time a flat supported by rock foundation where I believe the water tanks were, because obviously, even though they were getting water from the aqueduct, they had to store that water and create a system where they could get water pressure or water down to the various areas of camp. And I believe this is where one of the larger tanks was located. Making our way back from the Protestant chapel, working our way over to the Catholic chapel on the other side of the fenced-in area, we've come across just tons and tons of relics and debris from that period or that time that this camp was active. We find bottle caps. We find pipes that were used for underground water. We find bottles with real thick glass. It's just amazing uh, how many items are left out here. Well, as you can see, we found the Catholic chapel. I knew we would. It's on the far east side of the camp. Now, let me give you some stats about this camp. This camp had 15 shower buildings, 26 latrines, 113 wooden tent frames, an amphitheater or 4,000 gallon water tower, and two 3,000 gallon water towers. It processed hundreds of thousands of men, not just soldiers who were in battle, but also the support and supply trains. Now, the one thing about an armored division is this: it can only move as fast as its supply trains. So it was critical for the battle to be won that the supply trains were right there with them, or right behind them, right next to them, because a tank doesn't do any good if it doesn't have shells to fire. It doesn't do any good if it doesn't have gasoline to fuel the engine, or oil, or all the mechanical parts it needs to have in order for that tank to function. It has to have a supply team. So yeah, that was pretty important. Plus, not to mention food and water for the troops. And Patton knew that his tank command in his armored division could only go as fast and as far as his supply chain went. Yeah. And that might have been the difference when he faced Rommel in North Africa and was able to drive Rommel out of North Africa. Now, as you can see behind me, the Catholic chapel. It is on the far northeastern side. Not quite completely to the end, but definitely on the eastern side of the fenced-in area. Now, why it's so far away, miles, at least 2 miles, if not 3, from the Protestant chapel, we don't know. But we do know this: it is right here, and it is one of the better examples that has survived time in the desert. Now, the Catholic chapel here was just like you see it, except for one exception. Just like the Protestant chapel, it had a cross on the top. Other than that, there were images inside this spot and that spot that's now removed. You can see those in the picture, and I'll show you a picture of that. But they did their services just like this. In these rectangle areas that are on both sides is where the people sat who attended the services. Why this chapel was so far away from the other chapel, I really don't have any idea. Patton in his faith was probably closer to the Protestant, and in fact he once refused one of his daughters to marry a Roman Catholic because he was Catholic. So I don't know if that had anything to do with it or not. But this is a long ways away from the other chapel. So, and it continues, this camp continues out there. So I can't say it's at the end of the camp or at the edge of the camp, simply because the real edge of the camp isn't where this wire was. It's out there towards that hills over there. So look how it was constructed. You've got the white granite cross. Originally there was a wooden cross on top, but look at these beautiful ornate windows they put in. And there would be some
images in there that not like statues, they were like paintings that were in the two openings there. Really pretty cool. They did a really good job with this. Really nice.
Let me give you a quick look at the top of this chapel where at one time the wooden cross stood. Although both chapels served a very, very important purpose, in my opinion, the Catholic chapel seems to have been built a little more ornate, with the arched windows, the arched wall, the cross embedded in it. I mean, it just seems to be a little bit more ornate than the Protestant chapel. Not that that matters, because what was important was that people were coming there to exercise their faith, for prayer, for encouragement during these difficult times.
All right, let me give you some statistics about this camp at Iron Mountain, okay? 67,907,504 acres was acquired for just this camp. It stretched all the way to those hills over there, which I'll show you in a little bit. The camp was established in the spring of 1942. Initially, it was occupied by the 7th Armored Division of the U.S. Army under the command of General Patton. Throughout, he had 2 years of operation at Iron Mountain Divisional Camp, 5 armored divisions, and a number of other units were located at the camp. Temporary improvements consisted of 15 showers, 26 latrines, 113 tent frames, an amphitheater, one 5,000-gallon water tank, metal storage tank, and 2 3,000-gallon water tanks, also elevated and also out of metal. And then there were some pumps. The only permanent improvements were the Catholic chapel and the Protestant chapel, and the relief map, which is fenced in, as you saw earlier. There were at least 6 firing ranges located in this area that you can see. Now, these were young men who had plans for their future too. But here they were, they're finding themselves thrust into a war against an evil empire, the Nazi Empire, the Nazi Germany at the time. And here's where they came to camp and to train. Now, these were primitive. They weren't given anything except their food. And in fact, to begin with, they were only given 1 canteen of water a day. Now, you're going, well, that's tough, but you probably could be okay if you conserve water. And that's why they only gave them 1 canteen, because they wanted them to conserve water. But it wasn't just for them to drink. That was also for their personal hygiene. So what they found was that the young men were beginning to dehydrate and suffer from dehydration, passing out because of heat exhaustion. And so they brought in a study and decided that maybe we should give them 1 gallon per person a day. And then from then on out, they gave them 1 gallon of water a day for their drinking water and for their personal hygiene. As I said, life here was hard. It was harsh. It could get, they said, as hot as 130 degrees in those tents. So the guys would sleep outside. Sometimes the wind would blow so hard, it would destroy their tents. So they would sleep outside. They'd try to bring in pup tents to try and keep the wind from destroying them, but the wind would blow them things away, so they slept outside. It was them and the elements, and the harsh elements. In the wintertime, it's cold out here. It's freezing cold, bone-chilling cold. But I think that was the idea, because they were going to go to be shipped off to North Africa, where they were going to fight, and they were going to have to face the same elements the same heat, the same cold, the same wind as they were facing here, they were going to face there. And so it helped prepare these young men to be able to cope and survive in this harsh desert climate, which is what they wanted to accomplish. And they did just that. As these young men drove out, Rommel and his Tiger tanks, Panzer tanks, drove them out of North Africa. And the US and the Allies got a foothold, now racing towards Italy and then approaching D-Day. But here's where it started, in the spring of 42, which we are in the spring of 25. And it's warm. It's warm out here already. I got a nice cool breeze, which is great, but it's still warm. Tonight it'll be cold out here. They had to deal with scorpions. There's a lot of tarantulas here. They had to deal with snakes. I mean, they lived in a primitive environment. And again, I believe that was the idea. So they left relics, which you can see, and I talked to you about these circles here, which I'll show you individually. And the place is much bigger than I thought originally when I was walking around. It is significantly larger than I imagined. And I imagine if you walk around here, you're going to find relics everywhere, everywhere. Of a times past, but not too distant of a past. So, I wasn't sure what I was going to find when I came to this area to film. I found it interesting, and I heard that this was one of the better camps, had more artifacts, had the 2 chapels here. But now that I am here and been able to walk all around this camp, I find, because of the stillness of the area, very solemn-like vibe here, a very solemn-like feeling here. It is just, you just get so much respect for what these young men did here, and their trainers, and all the support staff and the supply lines, and it is just incredible. And you have to give a lot of credit to Patton, because you can't train men to fight in the deserts of North Africa by training them in the swamps of Georgia. This was the perfect place. I'm pretty sure they didn't think that, but this was the perfect place. Thank you for going on this adventure with me, for walking through this ground of young warriors who occupied this land for just 2 years, and for hanging out to the end. I would encourage you to come and visit this place, because the desert, as the desert always does, is taking back this area. Someday, it will all be gone. But today, it's still here. So come and check it out. You'll find it just off Highway 82. There's a monument that I showed you at the beginning of the video. Look for that. There's even a sign that says Iron Mountain Camp 1 mile. There's a lot more exploring to do, and that's what I plan on doing. Until then, I'll see you on the next great adventure.